The process of reviewing some areas of the Civil Aviation and Other Act establishing 6 aviation agencies has brought to the fore the need to put more funds to cushion the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on the aviation industry in Nigeria. While the bills have to go through legislative backing, an analyst says it's overdue that the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority be empowered to hold its own as regulator. Plus, the United States Federal Aviation Administration gives reasons for supporting the return of the 737 MAX as relatives of victims who died in the 2 fatal crashes leading to the grounding of the aircraft kick against the action. This and more is what's on our package. A warm welcome to the program. I'm Bukola Jo Oketumbi. Aviation's global stature as an economic engine is evident in the statistics. If the global aviation sector were a country, its total contribution of $2.7 trillion to the gross domestic product and the 65.5 million jobs it provided before the COVID era would just be as large as the United Kingdom. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, the International Air Transport Association has been assessing the impact in Africa, saying the industry and economies has worsened sharply since April 2020. Job losses in aviation and related industries could increase by up to 3.5 million. That is more than half of the region's 6.2 million aviation-related employment and 400,000 more than the previous estimate.
And the traffic should be, at the end of 2021, half of what it was in 2019. So it's better than what it is in 2020. It should be in 2020 around 1/3 of what it was in 2019. But it is still a very, dark picture, if I may. So we are forecasting an improvement, but not something that is totally unrealistic and spectacular.
Full year 2020 traffic is expected to plummet by 54%, more than 80 million passenger journeys compared to 2019. Previous estimate was a fall of 51%. GDP supported by aviation in the region could also fall by up to $35 billion. IATA had previously estimated a $28 billion decline.
For flying are perhaps changing. We forecast a pretty strong demand for personal motivation, tourism, visit friends and relatives. That remains pretty strong. For the business travel, it's another story. And we forecast a recovery of the business travel later than the personal motive travels.
In the midst of the recovery, which the global airline body says will require government support and funding, especially to airlines and allied industries,
to one another.
The legislative houses are looking into bills seeking to amend certain aspects of the Act establishing 6 aviation agencies.
A bill for an act to repeal the Nigerian Meteorological Agency Act 2003 and to enact the Nigerian Meteorological Agency Act to provide for the regulation of meteorology and related matters. A bill for an act to repeal the Nigerian College of Aviation Technology Act, Cap N96, LFN 2010, and to enact the Nigerian College of Aviation Technology Act to provide for its organization, control, and operation, and for related matters.
Civil aviation in Nigeria has left where it used to be at the background. It had added and increased its contribution to the GDP of Nigeria, making it one of the most important sector for economic advancement of Nigeria and consequently the prosperity of this country.
The major aim is to empower the agencies to make the sector more effective and efficient while empowering the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority to be the sole regulator.
Aviation is a dynamic industry and we must constantly review the status to keep pace with its obtainable standards. I wish to reiterate the committee's continued commitment to ensure that the sector remains one of the best through appropriate legislation and oversight, so that at the end of the day, we would have succeeded in bequeathing to Nigerians an air transport industry that is properly regulated and better managed for greater efficiency.
Away from this, the Senate Committee Chairman on Aviation, Smart Adeyemi, is making a case for increased bailouts before planes begin to drop out of the skies.
Some of them confessed to us, which they never did on the floor of the public hearing, that they have their goods at the port, that they couldn't claim them because of the charges. We must raise alarm. The alarm I'm raising today is that the airline operators are just managing. Other countries in Africa, they are giving substantial bailout to the airlines. If you say you are not concerned, God forbid, you don't know where you will fly, or your brother will fly, or your parents will fly. So we must come out to say this to you and to Nigerian people, and to please appeal to Mr. President that there's a need to review the 4 billion naira available.
Meanwhile, the Airline Operators of Nigeria has said that airlines, as a result of the financial problems brought by the effects of COVID-19, will not resort to cutting corners. And the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority says it's assuring the public of the safety of Nigerian airlines. The autonomy of the industry's regulator is overdue, and the government should put more money in the sector, especially in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, not just for airlines, but also for allied industries. That's the view of our guest.
It was their recommendation that even the 5% passenger service charge was actually meant for NCAA, not for all the agencies. The idea is for every ticket that you buy, that amount of money, 5%, goes to NCAA so that they can be autonomous. So they don't have to depend on anybody for their logistics, salaries, everything. If NCAA is autonomous, then everything is going to be okay. And I think this is something that is long overdue. First of all, to buy one aircraft, let's say a Boeing 737-800 or -900 series, or an Airbus A320, just 100 and something seater aircraft, for a brand new one with a turbofan engine, is not less than 60 to 80 million naira, depending on the configuration. So aviation is not cheap. You will see clearly that even during this lockdown across the globe, you see airlines getting billions of dollars, billions of pounds. This is because the country understands the fact that if they don't do that, then the economy is going to go down. I know that the government did something by giving about 5 billion naira to the industry, but to be honest with you, that money is not even enough for aero contractors or for ARIC, not to even talk about the entire industry. What the House of Reps or the Senate is doing is good, is profound, because I heard that they are proposing 50 billion naira, which, to the best of my knowledge, based on what I know, when you look at the C-check, D-check, and these airlines, their aircraft trapped all over the world and what have you, you look at the overhead costs, of running an airline, their salaries for the past 6, 7, 8, 9 months without any income, and you see one thing about the industry is that, you see this aircraft, if you do a fresh C-check today, whether you fly the aircraft or you don't fly the aircraft, at the end of 18 months to 24 months, is due for another C-check. So now we've lost almost a year. This year is almost gone, and no activity. Now the airlines have been forced to pay for C-check, D-check when they've not made any revenue. So it's not funny. Because you lease an aircraft from an aircraft lessor, even if you fly or you don't fly, he's waiting for his monthly lease money. So the airlines are under serious pressure. But you see, aside the airlines, part of the reason why you see MRO, such like 7-Star Global Hangar that we run and what Aero Contractors Airline is doing, fixing aircraft, why you see us not being able to meet up is that we also don't have access to this support. Because it's not just also only the airline that also needs to be built. We have the airlines, we have the fuelers, we have the ground support service, we have the catering service, we have the aviation training organizations, that's the ATOs, we have the aircraft maintenance, repair and overhaul. I mean, where do we get support from to support the airlines? So if an airline comes to me now that they want to do their C-check, they must pay 100% because I've not gotten any kind of support. And because they can't afford to pay 100%, that is why you see that we're struggling in the industry till today. Right now, you can see that Virgin Atlantic Australia is down. So many airlines are actually down. If there's any time for the Nigerian government to support local carriers, be it flag carrier, national carrier, or whatever you call it, this is the time. Because everybody is now on square zero globally. So when you come in now with a robust industry that is well supported by the government, you know, I can assure you that it will go a long way in helping us to compete. I want to see Airpeace, I want to see our local carriers competing with Ethiopia, Lufthansa, Emirates, BA, and what have you. That should be what it is. I mean, where was Ethiopia when Nigeria became the first crew to land in the US from Africa?
Domestic carrier Airpeace has been explaining that the COVID-19 induced lockdown and its other effects is the reason why the airline experienced a sharp reduction of its flight frequencies, as most of its aircraft ferried abroad for maintenance could not return. The airline says it's now returning to full flight operations as most of its fleet is not available to connect all its domestic, regional and international destinations. Virgin's Hyperloop has completed the world's first passenger ride on a super high-speed levitating port system, a key safety test for technology it hopes will transform human and cargo transportation. Richard Branson is Virgin Hyperloop's owner, but the Chief Technology Officer Josh Gegel and Director of Passenger Experience Sarah Lucian were seated in the pod as it hurtled through a vacuum tube at speeds of up to 172 kilometers per hour at the company's developed test site in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yesterday's test was really to show that this system could be safe for passengers. And so most of the time we have a low pressure environment inside the tube, and that would be like flying at about 50 kilometers of altitude. So usually the only people who fly in that wear spacesuits. But what you saw yesterday was Sarah and I just wearing normal clothing and getting in the vehicle. So we had to design the vehicle to be safe for us and safe enough for us to ride.
In a Hyperloop system, which uses magnetic levitation to allow near silent travel, a trip between New York and Washington would take just 30 minutes. That would be twice as fast as a commercial jet flight and 4 times faster than a high-speed train.
So that's really the next phase here, is taking, you know, these initial versions, these 2-passenger versions, moving them to the 28-passenger versions through the technology development that we're doing right now. And then in project work, we're really looking at something, you know, in excess of 1 kilometer, moving on to 10 kilometers at like a certification facility that will allow us to actually get a full-blown kind of passenger certification for what we need to do. So for us, the steps moving forward are really to, you know, continue to showcase that this technology not only works, but it's actually cost-effective. And then the second piece is really to make sure that we can actually have the full length to get up to the speeds that we'd like.
Virgin Hyperloop has previously run over 400 tests without human passengers at the Nevada site. The company is working towards safety certification by 2025 and commercial operations by 2030.
With subdued world economic outlook, coupled with trade tension and climate change, Africa is not insulated in all these, as globalization brings about interconnectivity of the world economy. On Business Incorporated, we answer those mind-boggling questions and dissect the issues as it affects you. That's not all. We also follow the numbers and what informs investor decisions in the global financial market. Every weekday at this time. We live in a world where breaking news is constant commodity. What you miss in the headlines becomes developing story. keep up with the news behind the news, developing stories, and the feel-good stories. Keep up with your world right here on The World Today.
It's good to have you back. The Boeing 737 MAX returns amidst controversies. That's on our special report.
We took the final steps to enable the Boeing 737 MAX to safely return to commercial service.
Almost 2 years after the Boeing 737 MAX was grounded and deep scrutiny, corporate upheavals, and a standoff with global regulators, Boeing has won approval from the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration to fly its 737 MAX jet again after 2 fatal disasters. The FAA detailed software upgrades and training changes Boeing must make in order for it to resume commercial flights after a 20-month grounding, the longest in commercial aviation history.
We thoroughly evaluated the certification of the aircraft's automated flight control system. We sought and incorporated input from the National Transportation Safety Board, the Department of Transportation Inspector General, our foreign civil aviation partners, the aviation industry, and members of the public. We published a proposed airworthiness directive specifying design changes that must be made before the aircraft could return to commercial service.
The 737 MAX crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia killed 346 people within 5 months in 2018 and 2019 and triggered a hailstorm of investigations, frayed U.S. leadership in global aviation, and it cost Boeing some $20 billion. The U.S. plane maker's best-selling jet will resume commercial service, facing strong headwinds from a resurgent coronavirus pandemic, new European trade tariffs, and mistrust of one of the most scrutinized brands in aviation. The 737 MAX is a re-engined upgrade of a jet first introduced in the 1960s. Single-aisle jets like the MAX and rival Airbus A320neo are workhorses that dominate global fleets and provide a major source of industry profit.
Now, shortly after I became FAA administrator, I pledged to fly the Boeing 737 MAX and promised that I wouldn't unground it until I was 100% comfortable that the aircraft is safe. And in late September, I took the MAX training that was recommended by the Joint Operations Evaluation Board, which included practicing the new emergency procedures in the 737 MAX simulator. After that, I flew the aircraft for about 2 hours to evaluate its handling qualities and the functionality of the flight control system. Now, based on all the activities that we've undertaken during the past 20 months and my personal experience flying the aircraft, I can tell you now that I am 100% comfortable with my family flying on it.
When it does fly, Boeing will be running a 24-hour war room to monitor all MAX flights for issues that could impact the jet's return, from stock landing gear to health emergencies. The U.S. plane maker's shares jumped 5.7% to $221.95 pre-market and were on track for their highest level since early June.
The documentation of the aircraft and some of its functions were not adequate, and the training was not adequate to accurately reflect what pilot responses would be to certain flight conditions. And we saw that, sadly, in both Lion Air and Ethiopian crashes and the loss of 346 lives.
But families of the Ethiopian crash victims in a statement stated that it's a feeling of sheer disappointment and renewed grief following the FAA's decision to return the aircraft to service. It is the same for relatives of victims of the Boeing 737 MAX crash in Indonesia. They have slammed the decision by U.S. aviation authorities to allow the jets to return to the skies, saying the move comes too soon.
We're fighting for for our families and for public safety. And we're putting our voice out there about Boeing and the FAA and their safety culture and how they put profits before human safety. And that's extremely important for the public to know, especially right now as they're ungrounding the MAX.
We don't have a final crash report from the Ethiopian authorities. They haven't addressed the inherent instability of this aircraft, which is because of its actual configuration. The software, they're keeping the software fixes and the hazard analysis and all the tests, they're keeping it secret, which is just, they won't show us the details so we can see if, they're actually right.
In the past, global air regulators promptly followed the guardians of the FAA, credited for decades with pioneering aviation safety. But many are now wary of seeming to toe the FAA line after the U.S. agency was faulted for lax oversight. In Indonesia, some of their aggrieved relatives said clearance had been granted faster than compensation. The BCIF's website said that the distribution of funds to provide philanthropic support to communities affected by the crashes would be completed by January 15, 2021.
A sector that before now was merely floating got hit by a ravaging pandemic, which has left not just airlines emerging, but airports also struggling for survival. The Muritala Mohammed Airport 2 in Lagos receives passengers, and the COVID-19 protocols are still in place.
The post-COVID era of operations has been quite challenging, but through the collaboration with the airlines, the regulators, and other stakeholders in the aviation industries, we will be able to put together processes and procedures that will give the customer confidence in the safety protocol for their traveling through the terminal.
The local terminal, run by the Airport Authority, is not left out of business, as Arik, Airpeace, and some others conduct their operations from here. Passengers say they have built confidence to face traveling in an enclosed space at this time.
I think precautionary measures have been put in place by the authorities of FAN. It is even smoother now to travel. The usual choking environment of non-traveling persons within the airport has reduced. And I'm happy that they've been able to do what some of us expected initially to be done. COVID-19 has helped to reduce the number of persons within the airport vicinity so that you know the real travelers that are traveling for the purpose of traveling.
Oh, it's very, very wonderful. In fact, they stuck to the regulations and everything. They adhered to it. I enjoyed it. And I can observe that the safety, of the people and everything, the precaution, they took necessary precaution. Even when I was coming from Abuja, it was so wonderful. I enjoyed it, really.
New airline connections at this time is also making life simpler for travelers.
I think the safety and precautionary measures that have been taken so far, in the airports, nationwide and everywhere, it's quite encouraging. You could see that the government, and basically not just the government, the individuals themselves are doing all that they can to ensure that they don't get the pandemic, encouraging other people to wipe their hands, use sanitizers and all of that. So the awareness is being created and it's good.
I think it's a very pleasant relief to Southeast and South-South. Having Port Harcourt, Uyo, Calabar, Owerri, and Asaba. Enugu coming up, it's going to be a very pleasing experience and an easy flow of movement to the Southeast and South-South.
So it's a very welcome development.
Despite the pandemic, the airport authorities said it's ensuring service delivery to passengers and all stakeholders. That's where we draw the curtain on the show. Thank you so much for staying with us. See you same time next week. I'm Bukola Joe Oketumbi.